I forgot. All right, I'm recording. So, this is going to be a little bit of a different format. Reason why is one, I usually, when I do lectures, I want them to be good. um, Thing is, I'm not capable of writing practice questions in short notice. Um, I've had to make a lot of changes in a very short notice for this unit. And one of those was to turn this into more of a discussion. So hopefully some of you guys do have some background knowledge of Unit 8. And if you don't know what Unit 8 is 1945 to 1980, pretty much encompassing the entirety of the Cold War. This is a very dense unit, and I felt like it would be better to approach it as if it was a discussion. If you guys haven't covered Unit 8 in its entirety, or haven't, or not like familiar with the content itself, feel free to open up the CED. Let me get the link of that open. Whoops. Yeah, well, the recording just saw what I do on Math Exchange. Get that. This is the link to the CED, general ideas there. And this is going to kind of be an open kind of thing for you guys to work with. I mean, I could theoretically just go through the CED step by step, but I think it's at this point, I think it's better for me to actually make sure that you guys are able to do the thinking yourselves, especially with this unit. And before we kind of like start off this whole discussion thing in the chat, does anyone in this entire space not know much about Unit 8? I remember Unit 8 does not was not covered by Reeves' class. You don't know much past the Vietnam War. Well, I think that's pretty much halfway through the thing, so I think we could just talk about general knowledge, e.g. news, skip the notes on it, conformity, my beloved. Is Unit 8... yes, so it's the end of World War II to pretty much prior to Reagan's election. Yes, it's 1945 to 1980. So it's pretty much the Cold War. What important stuff happened in terms of immigration? College Board doesn't really talk much about immigration in this period, which is a little weird. You're right about the Red Scare kind of affecting more of immigrants, because a lot of people had the belief that immigrants were more were socialists, right? Again, same phenomenon with the first Red Scare. I also want to clarify when we speak of the Red Scare in this unit. By the way, I'm scrolling through the CED for people watching the recording, to see like what the general ideas are. When we speak of the Red Scare in this unit, this is actually the second Red Scare. We had our first Red Scare during Unit 7, early on in World War One. 60s and the beats, similar to the 20s. The beats, yeah, in some ways they are going to go against conformity. Like how the flappers, the women of the 1920s, are going to go against conventional beliefs and all that. Key points of 8 are highlighted in the CED. So if you do not know the kind of where to start with this unit, just I already sent the link to the CED and take a look at that. The first one, yes, was at the end of World War One. The second one was pretty early on the Cold War, pretty much during the 50s, with the HUAC, Hollywood 10, Lavender Scare also is one. Yes. The second one particularly, what were the major? I know that it starts with the New Deal. Actually, it starts the Square Deal. So we're going to get the Square Deal from under Teddy Roosevelt. We get the New Deal under FDR. We get Great Society under LBJ. And we get the Fair Deal under Truman. There are no slides for this review, no. Because I haven't really prepared any good slides for that. I'm sorry. Yes, the Fair Deal, which will be under the Truman administration. Some people also do mention New Frontier under Kennedy, um, but it's just domestic is more of an economic term. What are main ideas of like social events? So I guess you guys should know, should understand, a lot about the civil rights movement, which is rather a complex subject, despite the fact being, I guess, in air quotes, popular history. You need to know more than just Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. You actually need to understand kind of the first stages of the civil rights movement. You also need to understand how the civil rights movement develops and expands outside of originally African American communities. Um, for instance, Asian American communities were also well involved with the civil rights movement. LGBTQ plus communities were also well involved as well. So there's all that. Okay. With that said, I think we should start getting started with discussion. Um, I think probably the first thing to talk about that would be most beneficial is the Cold War itself. So, kind of discussing what kind of foreign policies took precedent during the Cold War, understanding how the Cold War affected domestic views as well. Uh, so specifically, this would be like 8.2, the Cold War from 1945 to 1980, 8.3, the Red Scare, and 8.7 and 8.8, America as a world power in the Vietnam War. We will discuss LBJ in a little bit more document. So, I want to see. All right. I want you guys to start discussing, kind of try to walk me through, foreign policy in the Cold War and all this. Eugene Debs was part of the first Red Scare. He was jailed during that time. Right? Greece, Turkey, Truman Doctrine, containment. Okay, yes. So Truman Doctrine we're going to try to pursue a policy of containment, um, specifically attempting to contain communism as a whole. The Marshall Plan will be part of the rebuild effort in Europe. Why are we particularly concerned about rebuilding Europe? Yes, the Iron Curtain will exist. Why? What makes the Marshall Plan kind of important in this? We don't want them to fall to communism. We don't want Europe. How long will this be? I have an exam tomorrow. Feel free to leave at any point. This is going to be 2.5 hours long, I think. That's the amount of time. Domino theory, yes, that could be a factor into foreign policy decisions. Worries about World War One. What do you mean, Miss? Marshall Plan more involvement because of the Brokies. They turn into commies. Interesting, and try to prevent as many states to turn to communism. Yes, that is precisely what containment is. Okay. Now, as for containment, how do several administrations navigate that? What have we done? The CIA, all right. What did the CIA do? MAD is mutually assured destruction. It is a concept. Bay of Pigs. It is related to Cuba, yes. What particularly about the CIA? The Cuban Missile Crisis. CIA went places and replaced them unfriendly, even if they were democratic. Say tons of coups. Okay. Could you guys tell me a little bit specifically what kinds of, what specific examples of these coups? Proxy wars is part of it. Iran. Okay, yes. The lecture isn't over. This is in fact a discussion. I'm doing this for a whole formatting in a different way. Rather than a lecture, it's more of a discussion so that you guys are kind of being more active with answering questions. What I'm doing is just guiding you guys to make sure you guys get the key points. Interfere in foreign elections. Yes, they have done that in Vietnam before. Restoring it, and Americans didn't like it. Yes, Americans did not like this, but you would not be explaining a whole lot about foreign policy. American civil rights, privacy. So the issue of privacy is not going to be. How do I phrase this a little accurately? Um, the right to privacy and the issue of the government in civilian life is not going to be in full discussion throughout the Cold War. That is more of a discussion in our modern time. Shortly after the USA Patriot Act. Guatemala, Latin American countries. All right, good. So you guys have some examples under your pocket. Now, let's move on beyond the CIA. Someone mentioned proxy wars, right? What about proxy wars? Might we discuss, like, specifically what? Aside from Vietnam, we are going to discuss Vietnam in a little bit more full detail. Korea, right? Korea is going to be the other big example of proxy wars. There are other examples. You don't really need to know them. That is essentially how we kind of indirectly fight. Yes, good. That is an indirect kind of form of combat. We don't overtly declare war on each other. We never end up doing that, even though we've been. If Afghan conflict, yes, the conflict in Afghanistan, the Afghan-Soviet War, could be a good example, right? We supplied equipment to Afghan rebels, Afghan fighters, which ironically kind of became an issue for us later on in the Unit 9. So there's that. Major tactic because it was a major part of containment. And oh yeah, we gave Nixon too much executive power to declare war by himself. We didn't give him that power. He claimed that power, and we took that away under Congress. Congress will pass the War Powers Act. That's a little bit of we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So okay, you guys get the idea of proxy wars. Now one last thing regarding the Cold War, blah blah blah, and before we get to the Red Scare, was the Cold War homogenous in that sense? Was it just proxy war after proxy war after proxy war? No. Okay. No, space race, detente under Nixon. Yes, detente. Someone explain to me what does detente mean? Like, what is that policy? What does that entail? Arms race. Okay, there are a lot of minor proxy wars. So yes, you guys are SALT is going to be part of the method. One of the aspects of detente. Nixon visiting China. Yes, that is true as well. SALT is going to be a treaty that will involve kind of disarmament in some ways. They're going to decrease. Tankmen happened during the 80s. Yes, Tiananmen is going to happen in the 80s. But we're not there. Camp David, in some ways, that's a peaceful negotiation that happened under the U.S.'s watch. But, yes, the Camp David Accords. But this is not really going to be a part of the detente ordeal. All right. So, with that said, Camp David, yes, it's going to be between Egypt and Israel. What importance does the kitchen debate really have with regards to this Cold War? Well, it's more of an ideological kind of debate, right? for some reason it happens over when we have the mentioning of a kitchen, an American kitchen, and it's a formal debate between the Soviet and the American leader, Nixon, and I believe Khrushchev at that time. Um, and this is going to be more of an ideological discussion. In some ways, it kind of demonstrates the stances that both countries will have. It lays the groundwork for kind of the perspectives, I guess, of both ideologies. Okay, let's move briskly on to the Red Scare. So, very good job. You guys understand foreign policy. And for those of you who are new to Unit 8, hopefully you get the ideas, the major ideas behind foreign policy in the Cold War. Now let's move on to the Red Scare, which will be very brief, by the way, because it's a short thing. McCarthy takes the L from the army once he starts accusing them. But yeah, what's really the relevance of the Red Scare? Why do we really care about it? The loyalty stuff actually happens quite early under Truman. Yes, proxy wars. Policy of containment will involve proxy wars and bringing international aid like the Marshall Plan or the Berlin Airlift. U.S. conformity culture. Okay, some people could argue that the Red Scare will enforce some kind of conformity among Americans. We will talk about the society, American society after during the Cold War. Give me a second. Supported by both parties? That's a very good question. Hold on, give me a second. I ran out of water for some reason, so I need to go get some water. I'll be back like in 5. Alright, sorry about that. The water fountain is a lot farther than I thought. I haven't been checking the chat for a while. Okay. Okay, in regards to the Red Scare, what was the question I left off? Right. What was the significance behind the second Red Scare? Okay, what are some specific examples of things that occurred during the Red Scare events? Um, okay, what is the intent of the Red Scare itself? Not intent, but like, um, McCarthy wants power. Root out communists. Foundation, yes, foundation made fear. Yes. So amongst the Cold War, we get the suspicion, the kind of hysteria, this mass hysteria and paranoia, the belief that anyone could be a communist, that there was already some kind of communist influence, and that we wanted to expose that. That's also the whole intent with the first Red Scare. So both Red Scares are going to have similar intent. How will America as a whole, how will Americans kind of expose these kinds of, or attempt to expose, maybe the attempt is a little bit of a hint, to expose these kinds of quote-unquote spies or such? Report everyone to federal agencies, House of Un-American Community, House of Un-American Committee, affect changes in technology, lawsuits. HUAC is going to be one of them, yes. They are going to target some Hollywood directors, and actors, and scriptwriters. One of them is going to be Arthur Miller. He's going to be targeted by HUAC at some point. By the way, for those of you who don't know much about Unit 8, would you guys prefer that I stream the CED so that you guys know what we're looking at? Yes, please? Okay. Let's do that. Come on, Discord. Let me select it. There we go. So that's the development you should know. That College Board wants you to know. Americans debated policies and methods designed to expose suspected communists within the U.S., even as both parties supported the broader strategy of containing communism. I think someone asked whether or not this was a bipartisan issue, and I don't think I ended up answering that. That answers your question. Yes, it was pretty much bipartisan. In some ways, I guess the issue is still bipartisan to some extent. Would you guys like to look through the optional examples that College Board wants? Oh, we should probably do that for the first part here as well. So this is what we discussed in regards to foreign policies here. This is about kind of the ideological battle, the containment part. This is about international aid. This is going to be about proxy wars. This is about detente. Yes, George Kennan is also going to be one of those diplomats that will send this long telegram. I don't know why they included these, but yes. Oh look, the Richard Nixon. I didn't even know there was a C-SPAN video of that. You could probably watch that if you wanted to. Why not? JFK is a jelly donut. Why not? This is just a simple speech. Ich bin ein Berliner. Or I'm a jelly donut. Berlin airlift is kind of be part of the Marshall Plan. Some people group that. Military conflict in Korea, that's pretty much the only other thing. Indirect military confrontation. Yes, there's that. Any notable secretaries of state? Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger. I feel like I should have understood this that fast. It's a meme. Um, okay. Do you guys feel like you need a full length treatment of the Red Scare? Nah. You guys think it's fairly straightforward? Expose commies, and then just look at McCarthy as this one idiot, by the way. So yeah, straightforward. Scared of them being everywhere. Yes, McCarthy is a radical idiot. Yes, he does. He does. A little bit of a little fact trivia is that he kind of takes the L from the army once he starts accusing members of the army, and the army's just gonna retaliate. Oh, it's so dumb. Wait, the Kennedy? No, it's related to the Cold War. Tried accusing people above him. Yep. If it at some point he would have reached the president, but okay. Enough of that. Oh, I didn't want to. There it is, Joseph McCarthy, and HUAC Hollywood 10. There is the lavender scare. Not many people talk about it. But lavender scare is going to be kind of the phenomenon, part of the red scare that particularly targets members of the LGBTQ community. This is going to be that. This is going to partly be a factor into the gay liberation movement, but not a whole lot. Stonewall is going to be far more important, but we'll get to that. Let's see. Do we want to talk about society yet? No. I think we should get to... How are you guys feeling? I mean, should we talk about this? America as a world power? Actually, we already did this. We already mentioned this. And we also mentioned this as well. Maybe we should discuss a bit of decolonization. See, for those just the red scare, but for the members LGBTQ+. The lavender scare is going to be somewhat related to McCarthyism. I mean, here, if you read through here, it doesn't really explain. It's mainly the belief that gay people were believed to be communists. That was the primary thing. Now, were like all of them communists? Obviously not. The same story with the Red Scare. Or all the people accused communists? No. I guess we should go in order. Economy. So you guys love consumerism, right? That's my intro into this. You guys love consumerism. So let's talk about kind of consumerism and the rise of, I guess, suburbia. Yes, I love purchasing products. Nope. Okay, well, you do you. So let's start with this part here, the kind of thing here. So hopefully you guys know what the baby boom is, right? If you don't, lots of babies happening. You also get a lot of federal spending on technological developments from World War II. But this is not probably like the most complicated thing, right? You have more people working in the private sectors. You have more people having jobs. You have the support of the government kind of spending stuff, investing in a lot of things. You get technological developments that are going to make things easier for you and cheaper to make, and cheaper to buy as well. I think of Crumble Cookie deodorant. So yeah, hopefully this is not entirely was government-funded science a common thing? Well, we kind of had to fund science during World War II. I mean, that was the whole Manhattan Project, the Northern bomb. Yeah, the bombs. Yeah, lots of things that are in our daily lives were a result of military research. In fact, a lot of companies that kind of work on your household appliances or produce your household appliances are also companies that are involved in the military-industrial complex. Do not ask what General Motors was doing. Just know that they were doing something. How much funding went into the Manhattan Project? I haven't done the research into that. Hasn't that always been a common thing? Yes, until I guess recently, to some extent. But yes, there would be an insane amount. I would imagine an insane amount. But that's besides the point. Probably the other thing I want to talk about more is this part about class and migrations. So let's talk about suburbs. How do we get suburbs? Why suburb? Is World War II the cause of baby boom? Well, stable economy. What's that one town? Levittown. Talking about Levittown. Levittown is one of those suburbs government incentivized moving to suburbs. Rich people wanted to get out of urban environments. Houses because people were rich. Hmm. You guys are kind of looking away from this word here, middle class, this phrase. Middle class. Throughout U.S. history, in some areas, we've been looking at the middle class, right? We looked at the middle class in the market revolution. We looked at the middle class during the Gilded Age. Now we're looking at the middle class in this point during the Cold War. People didn't want to live in the city because it was stinky. People saved up and could spend it on the suburbs. How though? How do people from the middle class gain enough money to live in the suburbs? You're right that the suburbs is going to be more expensive to live in compared to the city. GI Bill was part of it. Okay. Growth of service sector to some extent, yes. Benefits? Some people will get benefits, but from the GI Bill, someone brings up GI Bill. That's an interesting thing. Why particularly the GI Bill? You're not wrong, but what particularly about the GI Bill is important? Benefits? Isn't GI Bill only for veterans from World War II? Yes. Benefits like it was a slur. Some people say it like it's a slur. Highway construction. To some extent, yes. Education funding. Someone talked about it. Education. Educate and get higher jobs. Yes. Yes. Good points. Yes. All of these are. Higher education is going to put a lot of middle class people who are able to afford it in the first place, and a lot of veterans who are, going to have that access, benefit from the GI Bill, and their families as well, yes. To get access to such higher education, and that is going to lead them into better paying jobs. So we see the rise of the middle class as, education, literally higher education opportunities here. And I'm going to bet that GI Bill, yup. Someone mentioned the infrastructure, yes. Interstate highways is going to be part of it. Does someone want to explain the interstate highway part? Boomtowns are a term that comes out of Unit 5. Unit 4. Unit 5, both. Involving railroads. But we want to talk about the interstate highway system, which was initiated under President Eisenhower. Why is that not particularly important, but why is that relevant to our discussion about the middle class, suburbs, and all that? This is not a really complicated question, by the way. Able to connect cities easier. Allowed them to commute. Yes, it made suburbs a lot more viable. Good. Fantastic. I guess they want you to mention that they want to mention the whole private sector. Hopefully you guys understood that the aerospace industry was already strong and that the automobile industry were very strong at this point in life because of, aerospace. We had to invest in, aerospace companies such as Boeing, which is kind of not doing well now, but at the time they were doing pretty well. Automobiles are going to be even more cheaper and more accessible for a lot of Americans.
even if they have pretty weird looking models, they're going to be very common, right? Um, let's see, what else do they want you to look at? Air conditioning. TV is going to be quite important. Hopefully, you guys understand why TV is important throughout the Cold War as a whole, not in just. You can see, yes! And we will explain the TV a little bit more thoroughly when we discuss the Vietnam War, the issue. Now, you don't have to look at photographs to see it and believe it, right? I mentioned a little bit before in Unit 7, the muckraker Jacob Reese used photographs to kind of bring the issues of tenement housings to life. Now you don't need to do that. You don't need to take a picture and send it to someone else. You can literally just watch it in a little box in your living room, right? There's going to be a lot of other kind of household appliances that make your life easier, right? The washing machine, the dishwasher, all this. Things that you might have taken a little bit with, that you might have taken for granted. These were all relative, yes, fridge. These were all pretty new things that were important. Yes, debates and presidential campaign will change significantly with the TV. Oh, something changed. How did women's roles develop in this era? So this is going to be on society. You guys don't need to talk about this. We will talk about the Sun Belt. So this is going to talk. So women's roles are going to actually be, yes, nuclear family, are going to be a little bit more stricter, actually. You would think that these household appliances would make women's lives easier. That, oh, they will have more time to do whatever they wanted to do. And to some extent, yes, they could do that. But this kind of belief that women are, subject to being only in the house is going to be even more intensified. Someone mentioned Republican motherhood. This is going to be Republican motherhood Republican motherhood is in Unit 3. That's a way too early for this kind of time period. Yes, that's all right. There's a document called How to Be a Good Wife in my documents packet during this era. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff like this. The idea that women should just be housewives will become the kind of stereotype. Way shortly after, we had women in labor during World War II and, for a good chunk of the U.S. history. But yeah, so there's that. We will get to conformity later. I want to discuss a little bit about the Sun Belt. Are you guys aware of the Sun Belt region? If you guys live in the Sun Belt, I hope you are. You live in the Sun Belt. Didn't women work as nurses? Yes, they did work as nurses. Yes, people moved south. Florida. Oh God, Cam. From Georgia to West Coast. Yeah, so very pretty much like the southern region. That's like, oh, you're cooked. So the Sun Belt region is going to be particularly economically strong, mainly because a lot of people tend to move there. Are you guys aware why people move to the Sun Belt region? There might be something there. So are we all Floridians here? Because it's sunny, better weather, because it's warm? Not defense contractors in California. Part of it. That's part of it in California specifically. Cheap land, lots of land, less tax. Florida man enticing growth of industry. Okay, someone mentioned industry. We had a lot of important. Gold Rush is a little too early. Gold Rush is in Unit 4/Unit 5. We're in Unit 8 right now, the Cold War. Growth of industry. We have a lot of industries developing throughout the Sun Belt region. For instance, in California, someone mentioned defense contractors. Yes, we are going to have that. In Texas, you're going to also have the aerospace industry. Same thing for Florida. You're going to get a lot of jobs there. You're also going to see this as a side effect of white flight. And some people have already mentioned white flight. So it seems that you guys understand it. White flight is this kind of phenomena of a lot of white families moving away from certain cities or certain areas and going to these suburban areas. And if you know anything about California, because I live there, we do have a lot of suburbs laying around. I would know. I live in the suburbs. So, well, not right now. Can I want to explain the Rust Belt and the Sun Belt? Was it because of total war? Um, the industrial boom in the South is gonna be perpetuated by World War II. Yeah, mobilizing of the economy, and we'll see a lot of these like manufacturing jobs relevant to World War II kind of be centered in these areas, like California for sure, Florida as well, Texas. Those are going to be the big regions. Did the World War II catch the South up to the North industrially? Um, as for extent, when you say the South, do you mean like the deep South area that we don't have a particular term for like an era of suburbs. We just call this the Cold War. Deep South, right? No, not every Deep South state is going to kind of build a kind of industrial base that will be as big as the North. Um, for the most part, there are some states. There are some states that will kind of get strong industrial bases, uh, but they are not going to have a whole lot of high concentrated industrial bases as much as other states like in the West or the North. In the Midwest, the Rust Belt. Someone asked about the Rust Belt. Um, if I remember correctly, the Rust Belt is mainly involving the Midwest. Basically, it's the area of old industries that kind of started becoming irrelevant. Um, all right. You guys get a feel of the economy, what it's like. It's feeling good. We get the rise of suburbia. We do get migrations, and all that. Yes. By the way, the migration to the Sun Belt is one of the reasons why California becomes even more important in current politics, because we just have such an enormous population, and mixed with the Vietnam War. How important were unions during this time? Well, a lot of those unions are going to be looked at with a lot of scrutiny from the federal government because of the whole Cold War thing. They will be dragged into the Red Scare to some extent. Um, Now, are they going to like die? No, we still have unions today. They're not as strong as what they were like in, I don't know, Unit 7 and Unit 6. I don't think they've ever recovered from this. But they won't be like, a very important driving force during the Cold War per se. Okay. For those of you who haven't covered Unit 8, are you following? Are you fine with the first three topics? Yeah, Reagan killed a lot of unions, pretty much. They killed their influence. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of Reagan. Um, yeah. Okay. Let's get to culture. I know you guys love yourself some culture. Now, a lot of you guys mentioned conformity. That's pretty much the big word for this. Conformity. But conformity is not going to last for a long time, right? We see like the rise of counterculture. Hippies. Yes, we will discuss counterculture to more extent. But in this particular unit topic, if I remember correctly, they are going to talk about the beat movement. There it is. Beat movement as well as rock and roll. Cults? No. Counterculture. Basically just, I don't know, like a kind of American culture that people associate with the 60s. That's counterculture, I guess. Um, do you need to care about these things here? No. I'm not a big cinema guy. I actually don't know much about these things. Assuming they are movies. Looks like they are. Um, this is a show. I Love You, Lucy. I remember that. But I think the most significant part is the beat movement. So, and I guess Elvis Presley, but just rock and roll as a whole. I guess Chuck Berry is also rock and roll as well. So what is important about the beat movement? And the whole sexual revolution will happen a little bit later. You guys are getting a little ahead of yourself. You're talking about the 1960s counterculture. We're talking about the Beats a little bit. The Beats did smoke. But I want to talk about what precisely made the Beats and rock and roll particularly a little bit like challenges to conformity. What particularly? Like describe it to me. This is probably not going to be like most like very 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 important. Like if you don't know this stuff, it will make or break your grade. But flappers were during the Roaring Twenties. Did they break laws? Rebel? No, not really. What's the idea behind conformity? Challenge conventional social norms. Yes, that is what the Beats would do. That is what rock and roll is. No, the sexual revolution is going to be Beats were a group of who did not like the social norm. Right. No, the sexual revolution comes later. During the 60s. That's the sexual revolution. What about rock and roll? What particularly makes rock and roll non-conforming? Don't make me play one of the weirdest songs. Anti-establishment. I don't know what you mean there. Does anyone have a little guess as to what makes rock and roll kind of non-conforming? In the 50s at least. Lyrics, parties. It's different. Dance moves, Elvis, thought of the units. Okay. You guys are hitting on good points about rock and roll. Yep, all that. Pushing against social norms. Conformity is the concept that in a society that people will conform to expected social norms, the establishment. All of this is going to be characterized, by your average suburbs, and are they going to ask about rock and roll on the exam? Not directly, not really, but they do tend to talk about American culture. I've seen past LEQs on American culture, so it might be relevant in that. Wait, I knew that. Yeah, conformity is what it is. It is quite, yeah, it would be good evidence for LEQs. Okay, let's move on. Before that, do you guys... Actually, no, let's just move on. All right. Let me check if... Okay, let's skip the civil rights in the early stages for now. We'll cover civil rights as a whole. Okay, let's look at America as a world power. Some of you guys probably already know the main topics in this. What America did, how it exercised its power throughout the Cold War. You guys have mentioned the Bay of Pigs invasion. You guys have mentioned how we have intervened with Latin America. How we've intervened in terms of non-communist regimes. Now, this one part here. Does anyone, a little bit of a trivia, does anyone know what this debate is most associated with? Like, which president? Eisenhower. Okay, yeah, good. This discussion will end very late. This should end around 9, so it's gonna be until midnight for all of you Easterners. Who doesn't love staying up? Okay, right. This is a bit of a thing. This one, decolonization. Do you guys understand decolonization? How it happens, why it happens, what makes it kind of important? No? No? Alright. So let me give you a bit of a rundown. World War II was not a fun thing. World War II destroyed a lot of economic bases, a lot of economic power of European powers. So, for example, Britain, France, Germany, I guess Italy, but is Italy really important? Belgium as well
are all going to experience a lot of instability. They have to deal with rebuilding on their own, but all of these European countries are going to have their own colonies outside in Africa and Asia. The thing is, when you have the instability in your country itself, it's not easy to deal with the instability outside of your country at the same time. It's not going to be easy to hold on to it. So we're going to see the kind of movement of decolonization. You'll also see the rise of kind of more calls for independence among these colonies, Vietnam, Algeria, and so on. So with all this, some Europeans, not every European, will start to kind of let go of these colonies. Some of them they will try to keep, like Vietnam. They will try to keep Vietnam and France. France will try to keep Vietnam, but of course they will take the L pretty early on, and America's just gonna get involved with that whole mess. But so there's that with decolonization. Um, Now, some of these new nations will side with other countries, with not other countries. We'll side like a certain with one side in the Cold War. Others will remain non-aligned. A good chunk of them actually are going to remain non-aligned, but some will start to associate themselves with the Soviet side, and others will force them to be on our side. I'm kidding. Some of them will choose to be on our side, but that is one of the things that kind of lends us to proxy wars as well. For example, in Angola, that's going to be part of the thing. With Ethiopia, that's also going to be a thing. We're also going to see the issue with the Middle East arise very often regarding the Suez Canal. Not the Suez Canal. What am I talking about? Regarding Israel as well. Hopefully you guys know who sides within those conflicts in the Middle East. But if not, in short word, we support Israel. Everyone else, who's on the other side. So there's that. So as for Latin America, some specific examples. You guys already know Bay of Pigs. Maybe you may have heard Salvador Allende. He is a dictator, was a dictator in Chile. But again, these are specific examples. Eisenhower is going to bring this up. I guess mad, but not really. Salt. Again, these two might be concepts that arise from detente. But in the Middle East and Africa, I already mentioned Angola, but Camp David Accord. Someone did mention Camp David. That is also going to be part of this whole grand Cold War scheme of things. Grand scheme of things. Che Guevara is also going to be a leading figure in Latin America as well. We're going to try to get rid of other, not only just Che Guevara, but also Fidel Castro as well. All right. Once again, Iran. Okay. So apparently we discussed this pretty early on. So let's move on to this one. We're going to talk about... Actually, let's not talk about Vietnam yet. Let's go back to the Civil Rights Movement. Specifically in the 40s and 50s. Now, the whole Civil Rights Movement that everyone knows and loves, hopefully loves, is going to be in the 60s, but we got to talk about the 40s and 50s, because the civil rights will actually start pretty early on. In fact, during World War II, we kind of see the start of it with the Double V campaign among African American leaders. Are you guys aware of what the Double V campaign is? It is not a military campaign. It is something involving civil rights. Win at home and in war. Yes, fight racism at home and abroad. That is the whole point of Double V campaign. The whole reason why we have this Double V campaign thing is that actually, fun fact, some African Americans were a little bit skeptical about the whole reason why we were fighting World War II. And some of them are going to think, yeah, I'm not a big fan of this whole war thing. I'm not going to bother.
And a lot of African American leaders, specifically Randolph, are going to be very concerned, because if they're not going to be seen as quote unquote patriotic, then a lot of leaders in the federal government are going to think that these African Americans don't deserve their kind of civil rights. Um, so what they are going to propose is this concept called the Double V campaign. Victory not only just in military conflict, but a victory in, destroying segregation. Yes, it is hypocritical for talking about we're fighting fascism, and when you literally have straight up, Jim Crow in the South. And a lot of African Americans kind of drew those kinds of parallels. So there's that. Does Double V make an appearance in here? No, it doesn't look like it. Okay. Well, let's talk about some headways that were made early on, before we get a lot of student organizations and all that. So yeah, understand that this whole progress was slow, right? Because this is over 2 decades. In the 60s, it's going to be fast. And this one specific thing, Brown v. Board in 1954, you have to know this court case. This is explicitly mentioned, so you know what that means. You have to know its implications. You don't need to know the case or the constitutional question per se. Yes, Jim Crow laws are still around. Little Rock 9 is going to be in there as well. So let's go through some of these kinds of things. Hopefully you guys understand the whole pop history behind Rosa Parks. Not only did she kind of, sat in the wrong spot in the bus, quote unquote, in the wrong spot, she actually will be one of the figures that will spark the Montgomery bus boycott. As you will probably see, boycotts will be, I'm not quite sure if her husband did have a car. But boycotts are going to be one of the key things that the civil rights movement will do. Sit-ins, yes, of course. Yes, she sat there on purpose. Let's see. Some of these are irrelevant. So hopefully you guys know the NAACP, what it did. You might want to know a little bit about Thurgood Marshall. He is one of the lawyers. He will become a Supreme Court justice. So there's that. There will be legal battles. There are a variety of ways, right? Sit-ins, boycotts, but also legal battles. That's what the whole Brown v. Board was all about. Let's move on here. Successes in ending segregation. Brown v. Board. Montgomery bus boycott. Kind of here. We do have civil rights legislation, but this is not going to be entirely huge. Little Rock 9. Hopefully you guys do know the whole story with Little Rock 9. Eisenhower actually pulling in the National Guard to enforce this integration, right? What's the whole anger before over busing and segregation again? Well, busing was kind of a way of bringing children to other it's a way of bringing other children to other schools as a way of getting integration to work. Emmett Till is actually going to be a pretty important case. Emmett Till was brutally murdered. And his case will actually bring in a lot of publicity regarding the civil rights movement. So there's that publicity. In fact, it was an open casket funeral for Emmett Till. So, yeah. Those photos are still up, by the way. I don't know if you want to take a look at those. Probably don't. Freedom rides are going to be part of busing, are going to be part of dealing with segregation in transportation. The March on Washington, well, everyone knows the March on Washington, but that's a little bit later. Jackie Robinson. Actually, there's a little statue at UCLA dedicated to Jackie Robinson. I'm not quite sure why. Jackie Robinson is going to be kind of one of the most important figures in African American history. He's going to be one of the first African American baseball players. Pretty early on, he's going to be kind of the face of African Americans beginning to break the color line within sports. Before sports were segregated, right? So like black teams only and white teams only. Yeah, he's gonna say no to that. That's cringe, and that's it's a fairly simple story. Hopefully, you guys get all this. But all of these headways, this took 2 decades, starting off in the 40s. And a lot of people are going to look at this and think, okay, this is not enough. We need to do something. We're getting impatient, essentially. And it's reasonable, rather reasonable. So we're going to skip all this LBJ stuff for a moment. And we're going to move on to the 60s. And then we will segue into LBJ. I promise we'll cover LBJ because you do need to know LBJ. Should have let Sherman keep marching. Okay, so in the 60s, we will see a lot of, again, tactics. They will continue tactics, boycotts, sit-ins, and all that. You should be able to describe. Yes, LBJ is very important. Understanding, like being able to explain how each of these tactics works, is something you should be able to do. And I do have complete faith that most of you guys are able to explain them because they are fairly straightforward. But if not, feel free to ask. Bro, is there more review? There is review tomorrow for Unit 9, but it is not going to be deep. It's not going to be really deep. Everything I do for A Push is recorded, so you can check the lecture calendar. So let's talk about you guys do know about nonviolence such as the SNCC, right? Yes, Unit 9 is quite useless. This is also kind of a no-brainer in a lot of ways. This one, do you need to know every single Supreme Court decision under the Warren Court, which was the court that brought us, Brown v. Board? Yes, SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee or whatever. The SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, under which MLK is going to be a part of. A lot of these guys are going to start off with nonviolence. However, we will see. There's a whole lot of examples. These are actually quite. This is the part where AP African American Studies starts being like the star of the show, I guess. But yes, here it is, Malcolm X. We're going to see other ways of navigating civil rights. So wasn't Warren apparently one of them, but actually quite liberal. The Republican-Democrat split, the modern day thing is not going to happen until Nixon. So we'll see some Republicans who are kind of liberal. Also, Warren was kind of involved in the Japanese internment part, but that's a little fun fact. Black Power, Malcolm X, right? So let's talk about Black Power, Malcolm X. What is this document available? Yes, it is in public. Here's the link. College Board is literally giving this out to you guys. It's very helpful for teachers. So what about Black Power? What about the Black Power movement? What makes it kind of something worth distinguishing from other nonviolent committees? Now, don't get me wrong. The SNCC is starting to get will start to get it was violent. Elaborate on that. What do you mean? Black Power was that they would do whatever it took. This. Black Power is different from the SNCC, yes. There it is. Thank you. It was more radical than I think some people hated white people altogether, so the idea of fighting back became popular. Yeah, the Black Panther Party will be pretty big on that. Let me be a little bit more precise. The Black Power movement is the idea that among certain civil rights leaders that that a lot of African Americans are going to think that the only way to achieve civil rights is to not appeal to white liberals, which was the whole nonviolence part. the whole negotiations that a lot of civil rights leaders were doing with white congressmen and women, but that it should be African Americans themselves who are to kind of uplift everything. So they are going to try to be independent. They're going to be self-determinant. That's the key word, self-determinant of all this. If you want to take a read at Stokely Carmichael, they perfectly embodied this whole thing. This is a rather important. This speech is a rather important one to take a look at. At a little bit of a moment to take a look at all this. Hopefully, you guys understand some of these, know some of these examples, key examples of ways they were nonviolent. But there's that. Any questions before we move on with that? Here are some Supreme Court decisions. Do you need to know all of them? No, you're not an AP Gov. But if you are an AP Gov, you have to know this. Gideon v. Wainwright. Civil liberties is going to be a very important part in certain Supreme Court cases under the Warren Court. So just know that that's a pattern. The most important example is Brown v. Board. It's pretty simple. It is relatively straightforward, but again, all of this is happening at the same time. Any questions about the civil rights movement itself? Among African Americans specifically. We'll talk about how it expanded, right? We'll take a look at this a little bit later. Because this expansion part does appear on the exam. It appeared on my exam and I kind of blanked on it, low-key. So yeah. Any questions so far about just the Cold War, kind of the conformity and the early nonconformist reactions, and the civil rights movement so far? How important were college students for the civil SNCC? Pretty much college students. A lot of college students were leaders in mobilizing grassroots boycotts and all that. If you guys are wondering what kinds of boycotts they did, a variety of things. They boycotted buses. They boycotted schools. Just pretty much anything you think that has an industry involved or involves money, they're gonna boycott. Boycott, or sit in. The videos, check announcements. There should be a lecture calendar, and those are where the videos are, and some recordings. All right. How did Black Panthers evolve from nonviolent movements? Well, during nonviolent movements, some students and some individuals will begin to believe that this whole nonviolence is too slow. It's not going to happen. Civil rights, I mean. So they are going to kind of subscribe to this belief that they are to be self-determined. They are going to form their own kind of closed communities per se. They are not going to engage with much coordination with white liberals who sympathize with the civil rights movement. And the reason why this is a thing is just for every now and then civil disobedience kind of gets criticized by white liberals. For example, when Martin Luther King gets arrested and gets put in Birmingham jail, and a lot of religious leaders, white religious leaders sympathetic to the civil rights movement are going to kind of say, hey, this whole disobedience thing is great and all, but maybe don't do it. We don't really see a reason behind it. And MLK is going to shoot back with his letter from Birmingham. And this is all going to be on kind of the importance of civil disobedience. And that's where we get the famous quote, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. So yeah. Any other questions about the civil rights movement? Because we need to move on to talk about the rest of LBJ, who was involved with the civil rights movement, by the way. He he signed in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which is pretty much the biggest civil rights act piece of legislation to in in U.S. history. It's not the first. The first one was during Reconstruction, but this is the one that actually does something important. Um, he also signs in the Voting Rights Act in 1965, just to make sure that African Americans can vote this time. Were white supremacist groups particularly more active during the civil rights movement? Some of them were. We kind of see the rise of the KKK again. It's not going to be as strong as it was during Reconstruction or the 1920s. Now, if you're looking at pure numbers, but the percentage wise, it's a little bit of It's like the sequel again, the sequel that people didn't really care much about and shouldn't care about. I don't know why I'm describing things as like movies, but I guess I am. So yeah. For some reason though, College Board does not want to mention the KKK in this whole thing. KKK is still active, by the way. There's a chapter very close by to where I live. So it's not as strong as it is. It's small right now, and it's right now, as of now, it's small. But during the civil rights movement, we will kind of see a rebound of the KKK in response to all this. They wouldn't want to mention as much to the reading said material. Well, they mentioned the KKK quite explicitly in Reconstruction. Let me check if they do mention it. There's a possibility that I missed it. I wouldn't. It's just not something they really care much about, I guess, apparently. No, I guess not. Interesting. What an interesting thing to leave out, College Board. Bit inconsistent. Okay. We need to move on, so let's talk about LBJ. Specifically, we're going to talk about Vietnam, which is something that I should know quite well, considering I do have quite a bit of documentation from Vietnam. Youth culture, we will discuss that a little bit later together. How did Southern Democrats fight against civil rights in this era? Opposing legislation. Democrats who were in power of state governments, such as George Wallace, they are going to, yes, exactly, you're hitting on good points for Vietnam. They are going to try to enforce segregation through a variety of ways. In filibusters, yes. In the case of Little Rock 9, they're going to try to use the state militia to prevent integration. So there's that. God. This water's not helping me. LBJ is from Texas. Yes, he's a Southern Democrat, but he's rather liberal. He's one of those Democrats in this era that were a little bit similar to FDR in many ways. In fact, the Great Society thing, that whole thing, it was like a continuation of the New Deal to make it a little bit more fair. Most Democrats from this period were pretty much Southern. So, yeah. I mean, Wilson was also a Democrat from the South. I don't remember where FDR was born, but he was a Democrat as well. But LBJ is going to be one of those significant... Oh, New York. Thank you. LBJ is going to be one of those important Democratic presidents that will kind of push the party realignment again. Truman is also going to be one of those presidents as well, by the way. He had to deal with the Dixiecrats when he was seeking re-election. And to be honest, thank God he got re-election. But not that I have anything against Thomas Dewey, but there's that. In regards to Vietnam War, how do we get involved in Vietnam? In general, not just this actual specific... Dixiecrats were a group of Southern Democrats. Dixiecrats are going to be people who really we're getting with the French. Thank you, Dees. Dixiecrats are going to be kind of like a faction within the Democratic Party that really loves segregation, and they're going to split away from some Democrats who will put some support behind people who are not huge fans on segregation. So yeah. So we did get involved with the French-Vietnamese War, or as we will call it, I believe the first Indochina War. Um, we will try to grant aid to France, but if you know anything about Vietnam, fighting in there is not something that Western powers have had a good track with. So before you make fun of the French for losing in Vietnam, don't forget that the Americans also took an L in Vietnam. Um, so there's that. Um, Domino theory is going to be a factor as well into kind of working with Asia. That's going to be the thing that will be the justification for involvement in the Korean War, for involvement in the Vietnam War. Just the belief that, you know, if communism starts out in Asia, then a lot of countries are going to fall to communism. Now, was it kind of valid? That's your interpretation to make. But there's that. So let's take a look at do you need to care about the Chinese Revolution? Not a whole lot. Let's talk about I guess you don't really need to know a whole lot about the military strategy in the war actually start when the Gulf of Tonkin was passed. Yes, the Tonkin resolution gives well, okay, it's not officially a war because it's Congress that declares the war. They didn't do the whole formal process with the war. We simply got involved in the war, quote unquote. You see, it's a little bit weird. The Paris Accord will be a way of ending the Vietnam War. Yes. The what the Gulf of Tonkin resolution is going to do is going to give the president a blank check, as I think Dees mentioned. No, Exotic Huey mentioned. Sorry, well you guys do understand it. And so we're gonna put in a lot of when was Tonkin repealed. I don't remember that off the top of my head, unfortunately. The resolution will kind of be nullified by a certain act passed during the Nixon administration. There's that. I do want to make a mention. Was Vietnam really something that we were big fans of? No, not really. There was a lot of debate regarding the Vietnam War. What were those kinds of debates? And why did they kind of kick off? I'm trying to facilitate this. Tigger v. Des Moines, the Tet Offensive. Lynn, you do hit a good point. Yes, that is an African American a reaction from the African American community because the government was lying to us. Yeah, there were questions about the government. Particularly what? About transparency? Yes, publication and news, media. What specific examples about the media? Well, I guess what specific example about from the media? Because in general, TV is just a little vague, but there is one thing. Okay, My Lai, yes, that's also My Lai. My Lai massacre. Um, is going to be heavily published on. The atrocities done there will also be heavily published on. But I want to. I guess you guys haven't heard of the Pentagon Papers regarding anything in Vietnam. Does that ring any bells? Pentagon Papers, publication of secret documents that revealed errors. Yes. So the Pentagon Papers are actually going to be pretty important in kind of bringing some concerns. Yes, that was done during the U.S. v. New York Times. The Pentagon Papers are going to spark quite a bit of opposition, substantial opposition, and we are going to see the rise of what? Well, they already exist, but we're going to see a lot of who? What group? Protests, but who are doing those protests? Hippies, college students. Yes, college students. Doves. I don't think birds can protest. That was a joke. So yes, students. They're going to. I know. I'm sorry. I mean, some people called them doves. I just call them students. Kent State shooting is gonna happen under Nixon. That will be a Vietnam protest. Though, Kent State. So a lot of students are going to protest this. Or how many is this? I don't get the question you're trying to ask. The Second Sedition Act is going to be during World War I, by the way. We have our first Sedition Act during the Adams administration. Technically, I think Lincoln also passed something on sedition, but that's not the most significant. Well, there are a variety of sedition acts. Not from what I remember immediately, though. I think you might be a little off for this time period. Because the Sedition Act... Is the Patriot Act a sedition act? You can argue that it is an example of a sedition act. Not really. Not necessarily. No. It's similar to a sedition act. We'll cover that in Unit 9. Okay. Now, after LBJ kind of... Was it mainly students who protested Watergate too? No, when Watergate happens, a lot of people are going to be angry about it. It's going to be quite bad enough that Nixon has to resign. Anyway, speaking of Nixon. So, LBJ is going to not run again. A lot of people are still angry about this Vietnam. So, we are going to get Nixon after LBJ in 1968. What is the whole thing with Nixon in this context? Talk about particularly his ideas about Vietnam. Fraud? No, I'm talking about Vietnam. Vietnamization. Okay. What is Vietnamization? You're right, but what is it, really? And why is it pull out of Vietnam, trying to get gradually pulls out the troops, but still gives financial aid, let them fight their own war? Okay, all of you guys get it. Now, let's see. Where do we want to go with this? Now, does Nixon really go in on his promise with Vietnamization? Is it going to be successful? Is it going to be good? I guess. What failure? Very simple way of putting it. Vietnam was, in fact, a disaster. The withdrawal process. But what else does he do in terms of his promises regarding Vietnam? Or in regards to just Vietnam itself. Or Southeast Asia, I should say. That's my hint. Bomb the hell out of Cambodia. Yeah, Operation Rolling Thunder is going to be one of those. Wait, no, that might be the wrong operation. But you get what I mean. So what Nixon's going to do is he's kind of going to abuse his powers. So, what kind of debate's gonna rise out of this abuse of power? Because the whole thing with Cambodia is not really part of his power, right? He claims it is, but it's not. What debate are we going to have regarding federal power? Or I guess executive power. No, not yet. That's Watergate. He's overstepping. Yes. How do we respond to that? Or I guess what is a response to this? The War Powers Act in 1973. Awesome. So this is an example of trying to limit executive power as a reaction to the entirety of Vietnam. So that's one of the side effects of the Vietnam War. Another side effect is just getting students riled up, I guess. But there's all that. Now, Vietnam, does it change really anything? Not really. But what happens throughout Vietnam is the most kind of major interest in APUSH. Let's move on to another thing that LBJ kind of started. It is the Great Society. So what's the Great Society? Continuation of the New Deal, try to eliminate poverty, basically like the New Deal, part of the society where Medicare and Medicaid. All right. Now, why does LBJ choose to initiate this whole kind of New Deal 2 or New Deal 3 New Deal 2 electric boogaloo? I guess immigration does make an appearance. Whoever asked that makes an appearance. Eliminate poverty. Uh-huh. And let me ask you this. Was the entirety of America poor? Hopefully no. Hopefully your answer is no. In fact, a good majority of the middle class was affluent. Hopefully you guys are familiar with all this. Yeah, JFK did have these ideas about addressing the poverty. He did try to pass certain legislation under his kind of new frontier, that's the term. But they are not going to have far-reaching extent as much as Great Society. So, let's see. What other issues does the Great Society address other than poverty? Because there are several things. What makes it even more significant? Or what makes it like something distinguishable from the New Deal? Because if it was just, doing the same thing as the New Deal, then it's not really something that we should, it's not something we should talk about a whole lot, right? More government outreach, provide welfare. Well, in some ways, the New Deal was kind of providing welfare, right? That's what Social Security does. Set limits on what presidents were able. No more immigration quotas. Immigration quotas is going to be part of it, yeah. Getting rid of those. I guess the one thing I'm looking for is a little bit related to immigration. The unifying branch for this is going to be regarding racism. What made the Great Society a little different from the New Deal in respect to kind of the racism stuff? It helped all backgrounds, right? It addressed racial injustice brought by the New Deal. Remember, the New Deal was not something that was for everyone. African American farmers were left out of the Agricultural Adjustment Act. African Americans, even African American veterans from World War II, were not able to kind of claim benefits from the GI Bill.
In fact, we actually have another piece of legislation passed that is specifically for African American veterans. But that's besides the thing. Um, Now, in reaction to this from the world, we will see another kind of wave of immigration. Um, I guess we'll call it the third wave of immigration. Um, so yeah, so let's talk about some pieces, some examples. So someone mentioned Medicaid and Medicare. Yes, those are examples. But what else from the Great Society did LBJ do? I've scrolled down on the CED, so you guys have a very clear hint. But you'd have to explain why they are important in addressing poverty or any kind of issues. Food stamps. The Food Stamp Act. Why? Why? What makes the food stamp important for that? What do food stamps do? They help poor people. They allow them to get food. They're help increase nourishment. Right. It gives them something to eat because people need to eat. Correct. Um, Anything else in your head? What else? Maybe something regarding uh, money, right? Because it's one thing to be able to have food, but it's another thing to be able to get money in the first place. Job Corps, right? That's another example of LBJ addressing poverty. Why it's important? Well, you're helping people get jobs. Jobs are the big way of getting money in the first place. So when you help people get jobs, this is similar to the CCC and PWA or WPA. You're getting people an opportunity to earn money in the first place. So there we go. Let's move on from that. The immigration part, don't worry too much about it. It is what you think it is. Kind of repealing some of these quotas and supporting immigrants from other countries that are fleeing communism. For example, we get a lot of Vietnamese immigrants and we get a lot of Cuban immigrants during this era. So there's that. Let's move on because we are have an hour left, and I want to make sure you guys have time to really have open questions. So the expansion of civil rights. Uh, let's see what you guys. What does this really mean? Like what what do you mean like by civil rights expanding, and what kind, like how? Why do we say expand? Brown v. Board is in the 50s. Compasses more groups. Yes. Loving v. Virginia. Chicano, Native Americans, LGBTQ, Asians. Yeah. So a little bit later on in the civil rights movement, we are going to see a whole lot of a huge civil rights coalition being built by a lot of people, feminists as well. Yes. So this is where I believe where the sexual revolution comes into account. I guess it's not, but this is where the sexual revolution is going to become relevant. Anyways, so let's move through them. So people we mentioned Latinos, we mentioned natives, Asian Americans. Let's start with those first. What will we particularly do in terms of Chicanos, the Chicano movement? And what will be the base of the Chicano movement as well? United Farm Workers, yes. Cesar Chavez for Hispanic Chicano students, yes. Okay. Um, Zoot Suit riot is going to be during Unit 7. Yeah, during World War II, 1943. Basically, a lot of Mexican Americans getting beaten up by police officers and soldiers in LA. Pretty much. Okay. Dolores Huerta is going to be one of the leaders of the Chicano movement. If you look here, uh, she's going to be closely associated with farm workers. Um, why farm workers particularly, though? We have like the United Farm Workers. We see the farm workers mentioned in this little optional document here. Um, we see the California Grape and Fruit Tree League being mentioned in this optional document. Why? Migrant farm workers came from Mexico. Yes. And they weren't very. Yes. Good. All right. Now let's talk about the Native Americans. This was the one thing that actually popped up on my MCQ before. So if you think these are each useless, I guess. But okay. What are the issues that Native Americans brought up? There was a lot. Because we've literally been like, killing them off, taking their land, violating their sovereignty. Throughout American history seems to be a pattern over and over. Now, in this time period, they're gonna. By the way, if you see the word "red power" here, that refers to Native Americans. Um, I guess we don't need to go in too much details about this, breaking treaties and all that. But the history, but the civil rights movement, at least in the context of Native Americans, are going to address. They wanted reparations. Some of them did. Some of them did. But they wanted to be treated better. I'm screen sharing the CED. Yes. But you don't need to know every optional document. Um, some of them will want reparations. Uh, uh, but the main issue among Native American activists is, you know, actually being able to do stuff. They were mainly confined to these reservations and kept in poverty. They experienced a lot of discrimination in job hirings and all that. So it's going to be another issue with that. Um, Alcatraz is like the first thing that came up to my mind. Let's move on to Asian Americans. You guys better do me proud with this. I'm kidding. Um, Asian Americans are going to be the same story as the rest of these. In fact, all of these are going to be about the same stories. And if you think you cannot memorize all of these examples, that's fine. These are rather generalizable. Um, I don't think a lot of people know much about Asian Americans in the civil rights movement, so I think we will just move on. You should know a lot about the feminist movements and the LGBTQ plus movements. So let's talk about women. Women in the civil rights movement. What did they do? What did they fight for in the civil rights movement? What's the whole second wave of feminism all about? Equal rights. And what? ERA. What is the ERA about? Give it a little explanation as to what this whole thing is about. Equal pay, yes. Discrimination on basis of sex, yes. Same wages for bodily private privacy towards abortion. That's going to be a little bit later on, down the road, in the 70s. But yes, technically. What else? So women are gonna target, I don't know, workplace discriminations, all that. We will discuss ERA, the issue of ERA, and Phyllis Schlafly, I think is her name, when we talk about the conservative movement. So yeah, understand that feminists are going to argue for, um, equal rights and sovereignty. Was Jane Addams? I don't know. My girl Jane Addams lived a long time, but not that long. Damn. So there's that. And finally, something that a lot of APUSH or a lot of U.S. historians don't seem to talk a lot about, the LGBTQ movement. So I think you guys do know what the LGBTQ movement and the civil rights movement is going to fight for, right? It's fairly straightforward, because to this day, you still kind of understand the goals of the LGBTQ movement. Um, I guess another piece of continuity you can mention. But a specific example we might want to mention is the Stonewall protest. They call it uprisings, but the Stonewall protests are going to be in response to um, Stonewall resistance is a response to kind of a police raid on a gay bar, aka Stonewall. They're going to protest that. It's like, y'all, why are you doing this to gay people? Let them chill, like, please. The whole thing with the Gay Liberation Front is kind of opening up social norms in a way to accept gay, LGBTQ people. What resulted out of Stonewall? A very strong LGBTQ movement. You'll see the rise of the Gay Liberation Front in response to it. They're going to do. Has gay liberation ever appeared on the test? I don't remember, but sometime I don't know. There's a chance it will. Um, has it? Not directly, I guess. But yeah, expansion of gay rights, the acceptance of the LGBTQ community, even if it's a little like bare bones in many ways, we start to see progress in that front. Um, the protection of gay rights. So there's that too. That's a fairly easy one. So let's move on to youth culture. Let's talk about what students were doing. Um, yeah, let's talk about students. So we already talked about anti-war protests here. We don't need to talk about it again because you guys know that already. Drugs. Which period has the most density on the MCQ? Chicano movement was perpetuated by a lot of Chicano students, right? But let's take a look at a very interesting way of putting it. They mean economic liberalism, by the way. So what are students going to do? What did they organize, right? But what are some issues that they will bring up? What makes them kind of okay? Vietnam. What else about Vietnam? Because we talked about Vietnam already. We're beating Vietnam like a dead horse. There are other things that they looked at. Voting age. Criticized liberalism for not going too far enough. We see the rise of the new left. Maybe most exemplified by the Students for Democratic Society in the Huron Agreement. Port Huron Agreement, I think. But what makes the new left new? What makes the new left new? Focused on social instead of economic. Berkeley. Berkeley will be well involved with the student movement. Yep, for sure. Um, a lot of California students are going to be involved with that. Um, yeah, social issues. They're gonna care about social issues quite a lot. And that is one of the things that makes them important in the civil rights movement because they will respond to the civil rights movement. They cared about social injustices, right? Those are a lot of things that they responded to. Now, as always, this is actually kind of a quote unquote radical shift in how generations go. This is kind of the flashpoint where students, like a younger generation, is going to outright go against the beliefs of an older generation. And we're going to see the rise of kind of this new kind of generational effect phenomena in government and politics. Um, so, yeah. That's really about it about youth culture because I think they also talk about counter. Oh, no, they don't. Huh, okay. Well, let's talk about a little bit about counterculture, I guess. Um, that's strange. Yeah. So, what about the counterculture? Right? We talk about rock and roll. We talked about the Beats. What else? The hippies. What about hippie culture? You don't need to talk about the Beatles, by the way. um, yeah, they love their drugs. LSD, Woodstock. Yep, Woodstock Festival. Expression, self expression. Yep, a lot of it. Contraceptions too. Particularly what? Sexual freedom. There's that. Yeah. All right. So you guys are getting it. Also, clothing will be a factor, by the way. So there's that. Okay, I think we can move on to. Let me look through. This is the last unit. Okay, this is a segue into conservatism. So let's talk about the environment because I guess so. Actually, in this period, we do get a lot of treatment, important treatment of the environment in terms of what the government's going to do. We already mentioned in Unit 7 preservationists and conservationists, right? Well, the government's going to do more in this unit. Why? Well, yes, Nixon's going to be passing the Clean Air and Water Act. We're going to see the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. We're going to see a lot of government agencies being involved, specifically the EPA, be involved with actually making sure the environment does not become a huge mess. But why? Um, why do we get a growing movement backing environmentalism? Any specific things? Climate change study or something? Hmm. Someone mentioned 3 Mile Island, yes. Silent Spring, yes. That is going to be like the whole establishment um, by Rachel Carson, which is a book you can still read. I think there's one. Love Canal. Don't worry about that. Yeah. Department of Energy was created in the 70s and 80s. You get Earth Day. That is true. Um, don't worry about the Love Canal if you don't know it. The Cuyahoga River Fire is going to be a pretty important environmental problem. Why? Rivers should not have fires, y'all. There should not be fires straight on the river. And the reason why the river is going to be catching on fire is the things we put in there, the pollution and all that. This is the CED. Oil spills, all that. So we're going to see a lot of concerns about natural resources, about the environment. And so we're going to do a lot of things. We're going to have these acts, right? The Clean Air Act. The EPA is going to be created. We get the Department of Energy to deal with national energy stuff, to make sure that we don't get, you know, uh, we don't have any kind of problems with energy. The reason why is, well, oil crises. So there's that. The FEA is going to work on a lot of things regarding our appliances as well. There are regulations of that regarding energy use, um, even though a good majority of, like, appliances already meet federal regulations. Don't ask me why people are still up on that, but there's that. The Endangered Species Act is also going to be there. So you'll see more involvement from the federal. That's the key takeaway. More involvement of the federal government with trying to make the environment not die, to kind of work with our natural resources to make sure that they are kind of being protected in response to a variety of things: oil crises, burning river, um, 3 Mile Island, a lot of environmental accidents that are just disasters in general. What's the energy regulation? That's going to come out of the federal government, yes. Basically, the Endangered Species Act is going to dictate how we will protect wildlife. Chernobyl's gonna be, and 3 Mile Island technically too, are both gonna be things that will dissuade Americans from turning to nuclear energy. When was 3 Mile Island? Should be mentioned in here, 1979. God, Walter Cronkite is still here. Um, Star Energy is gonna come out, but it's not going to be, yeah. Star energy regulation is not going to be the only regulation you should know in general for environmentalism. You won't likely be getting an essay on environmentalism. If you do want to choose to talk about, if you do get an LAQ discussing about federal government involvement in whatever, this might be one of them. The environmental area. This is a rather simple one as well. So let's move on. Strangely enough, all these were under Nixon, except for the Clean Air Act. Nixon is, for some reason, is going to be a bit of a environmentalist in some ways. The Star Energy regulation is all that to get impeached. I know, right? Star Energy regulation is kind of the limits that a lot of appliances have enacted by the federal government. So in order to kind of get your product to be beneficial to sell, you have to satisfy all these regulations. Appliances and will include a variety of appliances like dishwashers, fridges, washing machines, all that. I I don't remember if the toilets are under Star. They might be, but yeah, a good chunk of your appliances that are being sold today do meet the Star regulations. Um, but for some reason, people still want to get rid of Star. Because they're like, oh, it's too restrictive and all that. We'll get to that when we talk about Unit 9. We have a lot of fun stuff in Unit 9. All right, that's enough about environmentalism. This is an interesting society. Society in Transition. So this one, eh, should I really talk about all this? Should I yap about it? You guys want me to yap about it? Because conservatism, I tend to talk about Unit 9. It's 11:30, please. Nah, we're going till midnight. I'm kidding. If you need to go, feel free to go. Now, conservatives are not going to sit here and do nothing. We are going to see conservatives kind of respond to the liberals, kind of these left movements. We see kind of like George Wallace, Nixon, this idea of the silent majority, the establishment of Young Americans for Freedom, which is an organization that still exists today, and it's an organization that low key really irritates me. Anyways, stagflation, and so even though we don't see conservatives making the biggest comebacks like we do in the 80s, it's still worth mentioning that they will still try to organize in response to the organization that liberals will do, right? The moral majority is going to be in the 80s. Yep, once Reagan gets in office, they're absolutely in. Now, so there's that, and they do start doing this in the 60s and also throughout the 70s. In fact, it actually gets really bad in the 70s, but we'll talk about that later. Now, as for certain things that are bad, um, so let's talk about all three of these, because all three of these examples in the CED are quite some things that you should know. Watergate. Hopefully, you guys know the political scandal that is Watergate, right? It's the one thing of hotel, Watergate Hotel, Port Nixon. My man was paranoid, too paranoid, and he tapped in, and you can't do that. That's not something you should be doing, right? So that's a political scandal. The Iran hostage crisis, that's going to be during Carter's administration. That's going to be a bit of a foreign policy skill issue on his part. Right? Yeah, no. He was going to actually win the election, but he was so paranoid that he kind of shot himself in the foot. And then Watergate happened. The Iran hostage crisis is going to happen actually as a result of the whole things we were doing in Iran before regarding Mossadegh. That's where we get a lot of hatred from Iran, from Iran. So if anything, blame I don't know, blame the CIA. So yeah, that's part of the Iranian Revolution as well. It will take us a while to actually get the U.S. embassy hostages released. And this whole thing is going to tarnish Carter's administration. 300 days, let's check. They might specify 444 days. Even longer. So for more than a year. Not great. We also have stagflation, which is another thing that Carter would have to deal with. Yes, it was broadcasted, heavily broadcasted. Can I talk about affirmative action? So the idea of affirmative action was to make sure that it was not just white people going into these schools, but also that they would have to have kind of a diverse student population. Yeah, that's what Watergate was about. It was wiretapping the Democratic Party in Watergate Hotel. Yes, affirmative action today is not something that is permitted because of a Supreme Court case. Yes, there it is. Yeah. Versus UC. So yeah, now moving on, stagflation. Stagflation is a result of all the oil embargoes done by OPEC. When OPEC puts these, no, you don't need to know that entirely. When OPEC initiates these boycotts, oil gets bad. This makes the supply awful. And when the supply is awful, we get stagflation. That means you're going to get higher, lower kind of real output, and you are going to get higher prices, which is not good. So when your supply, if you know anything from macroeconomics, when you get your supply your supply stuff to decrease, then that's not good. Um, because according to the graphs, you get higher prices and less kind of real output, real GDP. So that's just not a good thing to happen to a lot of people. So oil prices are high. People don't are not going to be able to afford them at all whatsoever. So yeah, that's the whole thing with why a stagflation is going to be kind of like a crisis, an economic crisis. And Jimmy Carter's not going to sufficiently deal with this whole stagflation. It's going to last for a while. It's actually pretty bad compared to the Great Depression. And eventually, this is going to push some people towards Ronald Reagan. Now, before we choose to talk about Reagan, let's talk about some very irritating people. So, yes, let's talk about ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment. This was all for, you know, equal rights, to kind of enshrine equal rights within the Constitution. Um, it's going to die. Why? Well, there's going to be a huge mobilization from conservatives, including women, such as Phyllis Schlafly, who, by the way, was pied, and she deserved to be pied in history. Um, she's going to be very important. She's going to be a very prominent voice in moving a lot of conservative women to oppose this whole equal rights amendment, and eventually it's going to be sufficient mobilizing to actually shoot down the ERA. So there's that. What else? We do see the rise of think tanks, conservative think tanks, such as this piece of crap. Pardon the language, but it is a piece of crap. The Heritage Foundation, which is the one political think tank that brought us Project 2025. So if you guys like how expensive eggs are getting, blame the Heritage Foundation, because it's their fault. They're also they're part of the team that also is kind of killing your scholarships as well for college. So there's that. I guess I said before that I'm afraid of jumping into politics, but I guess I'm embracing it now. Um, so yeah, there's that. We will see a lot of conservative. So there's the Heritage Foundation. You will see CPAC, very notable, because it's still around, right? CPAC. Um, and yeah, and then evangelicalism is going to be back. We call this, I believe this is the third or the fourth, whatever. And we are going to see the rise of the religious right from these kind of Christian churches. Now, what separates these Christians from, the Christians of the Great Awakening, Second Great Awakening, or the Christians that gave us progressivism, is that these guys are conservative, and they are going to be in response to all this changing civil rights stuff. So I guess in some ways Christians switch up with their whole thing. The New Left is basically a rejection of the idea that the federal government should not be too concerned with social issues. The New Left is going to push this idea that the federal government should be involved with addressing social issues. No, you don't need to know all of them, just know a good chunk of them. The new right is going to form out of is what we call is the modern day conservatives. Yes, they are opposites of each other. The new right is going to want to keep things the same way. in response to the civil rights movement and the new left. Um, the new right is going to also mobilize is going to be very strongly aligned with evangelicals, with Christians as a whole. They're going to bring in the idea that, oh, Christian values must be preserved because all these guys are doing is non-Christian. So there's that. And what is exactly evangelicalism? Um, I mean, one example of it. Puritanism is an example of evangelicalism. Neoliberalism is a conservative concept under Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. There's heavy emphasis on the Bible and Christian values over anything else, and that includes social issues. The focus of the nuclear family, that's part of the culture. The conformist culture, the nuclear family, the roles of the woman and the role of the dad, of the man, all that. That's conformist culture. When do we learn about McDonald's? Unit 9. Yes, they are going to bring back traditional family values, and that involves the nuclear family. Yep. No. All right. This is it. Um, that's all about the Cold War. Now I'm gonna scroll back up to the topics list. Um, no, there's a lot of topics in this, but some of them are very well connected to each other. Obviously, this is a very huge oversimplification. If I had the time, I would be in depth as much as I can, but I was already in depth for literally the last 7 units. So, yeah. Okay. So, anyways, are there any questions? I don't know if you guys can read that well. Are there any questions about Unit 8? Go ahead and shoot. Percentage of tests, same as units 3 through 7. 10 to 17%. So it's really important. Actually, the reintroduction of prayer in schools is still an issue today. So the significance of Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam is going to be an example of African Americans kind of forming trying to push this idea of self determinism. They are going to that's pretty much it about Malcolm X. Um, Major differences between leaders in this period. LBJ was well involved with the Great Society. He was the one that did get us into Vietnam. Nixon was trying to go through Vietnamization. Um, However, he gets the Watergate stuff. He uses Southern strategy. We will talk about the political realignment in Unit 9 in a little bit more detail. Eisenhower, he's pretty much a conformist kind of guy. He doesn't really do much. He does the interstate highway system. He gets that up. Um, he does get involved with Little Rock 9. So there's that. Sunbelt is someone already explained it. Jesus Christ, you guys. Is Eisenhower moderate? Yes, he's rather moderate. He will give us a speech about the military-industrial complex in his farewell. What was the Little Rock thing? Nine students are Kansas and Arkansas and Little Rock, who are going to be to this other school as part of the integrationist thing. But George Wallace is going to try to get them to not go by pulling in the state militia. Eisenhower is going to respond by putting in the National Guard, who are going to escort these 9 kids to go to school, which is a bit of a wild thing. So yeah, it was Eisenhower, yes. What else? I don't see any other questions then, you guys. Was that the George Wallace block door thing? Or do you mean George Wallace block door thing? Like George Wallace calling in the guard to block the students? I don't quite understand your question. Oh, yes, I didn't see this one. What are some other main cases other than Plessy v. Ferguson and Brown v. Board? Dred Scott, Marbury v. Madison. Um, you need to know those two and their relevance in U.S. history. We have to know the Young Americans of Freedom. Those two are examples of students being involved in political participation. To some extent, yes. But are they going to make and break your score? No. Um, George Wallace, yes, I think he will do that. Dred Scott decision the idea that slaves were property, and they had no right to sue, and also the government had no right to take away property without due process. So this was kind of a reversal of all the abolitionists' progress made. What are some general big picture examples of continuity or change I should know? Um, the way we abuse Native Americans. There's that. Westward expansion. Yeah, there's that. What was Du Bois v. Washington? Booker T. Washington v. W.B. Du Bois. So the debate between those two leaders were regarding racial uplift. Here's where I'm gonna get AP African American Studies on you. So Booker T. Washington's is going to propose that African Americans should go to technical schools, should get jobs, should prove their worth to white people, so that they will get rights. They will see, oh, African Americans are useful. They should have rights. W.B. Du Bois is going to argue that African Americans should have a liberal arts kind of education. Um, so there's that. So Washington, the key speech from Washington, or key source from Washington, Booker T. Washington, by the way, is going to be the Atlanta Compromise. That's where he kind of outlines his whole idea. Du Bois's key ideas are going to come from the Souls of Black Folk, which will discuss the key issues that African Americans will face regarding the color line, as well as how African Americans are able to kind of experience racial uplift, and that's going to be in his argument, liberal arts education. Washington's going to argue it's the job. The APUSH exam is not going to be very different in terms of skills from AP World, but it will be a little bit more difficult in what you need to remember, because AP World is going to test your ability to kind of understand general historical developments. APUSH is very content heavy, so there's that. What's the difference between Malcolm X and MLK? MLK was very big on nonviolence, but Malcolm X said, "Hey, maybe violence might be a necessity." So there's that. Where were Casta paintings when you need them? Oh God, the Casta system is very complicated as time went on, in Spain. Nope, he was not. Malcolm X did soften his position, but that was near the end of his life. Stokely Carmichael is another example of Black Power. No, we are not going to do an entire review on Thursday. Yes, he was assassinated. Stokely Carmichael was a Black Panther, I believe. A leader of the Black Panther. I might be remembering this incorrectly. But it was certainly Black Power. Big with Black Power. We are not going through all the units on Thursday. We are going over some key things to do with the exam, and the rest of it is going to be office hours. In that case, you can ask me anything about units. How do I not fall asleep reading the giant paragraph? Uh, I don't know. You're just gonna have to find ways of just coffee. Um, Try to like you underline, I guess. Try to get yourself to underline things as you go reading so that you're actively reading through it. Um, I will go over the DBQ and the LEQ stuff. Tips. Okay. Any more questions on Unit 8? I got a 5. What started the downfall of traditional gender norms like counterculture? Um, no, not really. The In terms of traditional gender norms, is just that actually gender norms starts getting challenged very early on by the feminists in 1848. But we will continuously like see these challenges throughout American history. As for counterculture, yes, the beats will probably be important in kind of codifying counterculture as an actual part of American culture. Um, Jack Kerouac is going to be one of the beats. Yes, beat poets. Very big on San Francisco because a lot of them were centered in San Francisco. Um, I actually haven't read any beat poetry, so might be the case that I will probably read through. Yes, we will go over parts of Unit 9 tomorrow. I don't know if I want to go through all of it. Okay, hold on. Before I talk about Unit 9, yap about Unit 9 for a little bit. Are there anything else that you guys want me to cover regarding Unit 8? Oh, DBQ predictions. I actually haven't been paying attention to past patterns with DBQs. It's probably not going to be on citizenship because that was the DBQ I did. So possibly on feminism. I can't really tell. 2023. That's when I took it. Yeah. There will be no DBQ on periods 1, 2, and 9. Okay, it looks like no one really wants to talk about Unit 8 anymore, and that's reasonable because that's been like over 2 hours since we did that. Um, See, it's getting pretty late. So, yeah. So this is all the topics. Hopefully, you guys feel a little comfortable with each of these. Are you guys feeling quite right with that? Okay, good. Um, Shoot, I don't have the feedback form on me right now. I was gonna talk about give me some feedback because I want to see if this is something that you guys prefer over staring at a slide and just me yapping. Do some activities, and we're done, and have questions at the end. Do you guys like this kind of discussion format? I feel like this is kind of a way of getting you guys to think. Let's do a Kahoot now. Yeah. I started like 2.5 hours ago. I'm sorry. Can we do a Kahoot? I don't know. Can we? Okay. Question answer is really good. Okay. Awesome. I'll I'll probably do that at some point. I might adopt that kind of system then. So about Unit 9, what we are a preview of what we're gonna do for Unit 9. Um, let's move on down. Very long CD. So Unit 9 goes from 1980 to now. It is the smallest unit. You guys don't need to freak out about whether or not you know any of this stuff. Probably the only things you really should care about are these two topics: Reagan conservatism and the end of the Cold War. All three of these are quite modern. I believe we will probably go zoom through these quite quickly. And in that case, if we finish it early, we might do a little discussion on where we are in U.S. history as of now, talking about a little bit of current events and see what the future is like for us. Because I feel like this is something I would end with in an A-push class that I would teach. So there's that. Yeah. So this is a bit of a preview that we will look at. Very quick, and the discussion format will be very similar to what we did today. And it seems that you guys like this. All right. With that said, anything else you guys would like? Kahoot. Thing is with Kahoot, I don't know if there's anything on really any good Kahoots for A-push. Nope. Computer, really? Let's take a look. I don't care. They can eat. Oh, this is Barron's. I guess we could do this for a little bit. Yeah, we probably will do this tomorrow. Yeah, there's not a lot of I'm not a big fan of Kahoots and all that. But yeah. Bro, is reading the textbook actually helpful? That's kind of one of the ways I've been preparing these things, is reading through a textbook, reading through books. So yeah. By the way, after the A-push, I will put in several 2-polls, specifically about the formatting of these lectures, the approaches I want to do, and as well as what else? Oh, and as well as going over the FRQs after they are posted. I don't know if you guys want to do a debrief like that. I don't know. What do you guys think? Would you like to do a debrief on the FRQs with me? Once they get posted. They should get posted like Sunday. All right. I will schedule that whenever. This is depend on when they release it. So yeah. All right. Okay, with that said, last minute questions before we end it for the night, and hopefully you guys get to have go straight to bed and doze off for, I don't know, your 7 hours of sleep. You should know Marbury v. Madison. You also should know, God, I'm blanking. You should know Marbury v. Madison, and you should also know one other court case that I am blanking on. What am I blanking on? Definitely Marbury v. Madison, Dred Scott, Brown v. Board, Plessy v. Ferguson. Versus v. Georgia? No, not exactly. God, why am I blanking on this court case? Jesus. Roe v. Wade is no longer like important. McCulloch v. Maryland, I guess so. I don't know if McCulloch v. Maryland. I think McCulloch v. Maryland might be on there. McCulloch v. Maryland was basically someone trying to tax the national bank. And, well, they can't do that. They basically said, oh, federal has precedence over state. Yep. So here we are. Plessy v. Ferguson was separate but equal doctrine. Oh, Gibbons v. Ogden. That's a certainly new one. I don't think Gibbons v. Ogden is necessarily the most important Supreme Court case to look at. So yeah. All right. Okay. It is almost 9 here, which is where I want to end this off. So, if you guys do have any more questions, you can ask them tomorrow, or you can ask them at my office hours. Unfortunately, my office hours on Wednesday are going to be very, very, very late. They're going to be open at midnight. I'm sorry. I think a little past midnight. Let me check. You guys will get to see my insane calendar. When did I schedule? Yep, it's at midnight. I'm sorry. Oh, it's midnight tomorrow. No, midnight EST. I'm sorry. So yeah. That's the scheduling we have. And Thursday is going to be normal. It's going to be at 7:15 EST. All right. I just realized that everyone knows what my school schedule looks like. Okay. I'm going to leave it off here. You guys have any questions, feel free to ask me in A-Push channel or just tomorrow. All right. Yeah. That's a relief. All right. Good night, everyone. Get some sleep, please. I need some sleep.